Okay, as we should already know, a URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, and it's basically an address label that an HTTP server will use to grab some sort of resource from the server or from the file system to return back to a client. All right, so the URL is going to give the server all the information that the server is going to need in order to serve that specific request coming from the client. All right. So we saw previously in another module that a URL can be broken down into several different components. All right. Each one of those components is going to give that web server information on how to route, how to handle an HTTP request from the client, and we've already seen the basic structure of an HTTP, of a URL. All right. So when we want to work with a URL in Node.js, on the server side, then we need some sort of object to encapsulate all the information about a URL that makes it easy for us to parse that said information. All right. So fortunately for us, Node.js includes what we call the URL object. All right. And we can create a URL object from an incoming URL string. And once we create that URL object, then we have access to the properties of that object. So we can see an example of using that here. The first thing we need to do is require the URL module. That's the first simple line. The next thing we want to do is parse, or excuse me, we're going to set our URL value here. All right. And then to create the URL object, all we need to do is call the parse method, passing it the URL value. I just cannot say it today. All right. And for now, just pass true and true here. If you want to know what those do, dig deep into the documentation. They're nothing special, so we generally set those to true and true. All right. So parsed URL at this point is going to be a URL object. And here, if we run this, you'll see an example of us calling the individual properties that are on that URL object: the auth, the href portion, the hash portion, the host name portion, the path name, the port, the protocol, search, slashes. So enter this code in when you get a chance and play around with it with some sample URLs that you may want to try to see what you get for each property that it gives back there. All right. Now, we also have a concept of resolving a URL. What does it mean to resolve a URL? Well, what happens is a long drawn out process of resolving a resource from the client visiting these things that we call naming servers and basically resolving the URL to an IP address. All right. Now, what we want to do is sometimes resolve one URL to another URL. So, for instance, if we had on a previous website and we had some resources out there that people were requesting pretty frequently, and we move those resources. Well, what happens if they type in the same URL? Because we know people can bookmark URLs. Well, they'll get back a error that that resource is not located at that location. All right. Well, sometimes we want to resolve that incoming address to a different one. All right. So that's where the URL resolve property comes in. So we can use our same URL module in order to use this feature. And we again need a URL to work with, and we need a new URL that we want to resolve to, such as another, the different path, and a different query. All right. Now, in order to resolve that, we simply just need to go URL.resolve the original URL, so which is URL value, and the new URL, which is new resource. And that's all to it. All right, so play around with that one as well to see what results you get. All right, that is it for URLs. When we come back, we'll talk about working with query strings and form parameters. Take care.